Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the AI Best Business Show. Today I have with me Mike Beckishman, Beckham. Huh? I said it wrong.
Like Beckham.
I've been struggling with names for the first six episodes. I haven't get used to pronouncing the names right. I get nervous saying the names of my guests for some reason, but I guess I'll get used to it. Mike, let me jump right in. So before Simple Modern, you had different entrepreneurship startups. You ran an online auction business, or you were part of a team that ran an online auction business. Can you tell it? And I knew about that going through your blogs on your website. Could you let the audience know about that? Let's set up the stage of who you are. What did you do before getting into Simple Modern?
Absolutely. So in 2009, I was actually working in the nonprofit world, and my brother had been doing affiliate marketing, but he really wanted to start a business and asked me if I would be willing to help him start a business. We had an idea. There was this company in Europe that was running kind of an auction model that we thought was interesting, that we thought we could improve. And so we recruited a few people, including like my best friend from high school, and we started a auction website in October of 2009. It was called Quibids. Kind of was quick bids, shortened was the idea. And it took us, I would say, probably like 4 to 6 months to really understand how to market it, to really get to product market fit. And then it just kind of exploded. So 13 months in, so November of 2010, we had our first $1 million revenue day.
Oh, wow.
Obviously just insane. And I wasn't even full-time with the company. I'm working in the nonprofit world. And I'm helping, run this company that's just, growing like crazy. And then, a few months later, my wife and I got pregnant with our first kid, my son Carter, and it was like, okay, I can't do all this, at the same time, at the same level. And that's what ended up drawing me into the business world. So I transitioned in the business world, and for several years helped operate that business with my brother, and we started up a few other e-commerce concepts. So I'm kind of like one of the OGs of e-commerce, going all the way back and pre-2010, before Shopify was really a thing, before AWS and the marketplace had really become big things, and we did almost $1 billion in revenue in those companies. In e-commerce, kind of D2C e-commerce. And all of that was kind of the prelude to me starting Simple Modern with two other co-founders in late 2015.
Well, so basically you went through a lot of experiences before getting to Simple Modern, and in each of them you had your successes and failures. On your blog, you also talk about a second e-commerce startup you started, which is Quibids. If I'm
Quibids is the first one. The second one was a concept we were calling Shopee, and the idea was like it was a normal e-commerce website. You kind of purchase things kind of like you would on Amazon, but then when you went to check out, there would be like a kind of a game that you could play, and depending on how you did in the game, you want a discount on your order. So it was this idea of kind of entertainment shopping. And what's funny is that in so many ways we had the right idea, just the wrong application of it. At the same time that we were developing that, this is when things like Supercell with Clash of Clans, and King with Candy Crush. This is when all of that stuff was starting to kind of develop and happen.
Okay.
And so we were trying to apply these concepts of these games to shopping. We didn't realize that a lot of people would just spend a bunch of money just to play the
game
itself.
Right.
And then the other mistake we made was we'd had all kinds of success in desktop with Quibids. The transition to mobile had started, but it was still pretty early on. And we really built our technology around Flash, which was, Apple basically decided not to support Flash. And obviously things went towards apps. And so we made probably some just, it was kind of one of those, we're in the right place, we've got the right general idea, the way we applied it, the way we went about it with the technology was wrong. And so it was a really disappointing venture, honestly. Like we we had such high hopes for it, and we invested so much time and money into it, and then it just didn't work. And for me, I think it was a kind of a seminal moment in my career where I was able to really start to grapple with failure and what do you do when things just aren't going the way that you hope that they go. And in a lot of ways, I think it helped make me a much stronger business leader and entrepreneur. So today, one of the things that I really emphasize to aspiring entrepreneurs, younger entrepreneurs, is that failure is a necessary ingredient in success. You really cannot get to success without failure. And one of the reasons for that is because learning, which is what you have, learning is how you get to success. And learning is basically repeatedly failing. It's when you take the way that you understand the world and you realize it's wrong and you adjust it and amend it. And then you realize that's not quite right and you adjust it and you amend it. So if learning is this kind of constant process of kind of failing and pushing through that failure, then the only way you ever get to success is through a significant amount of failure. And then I think the other thing that I really learned from that is that I'm a very high persistence person. Most very successful people have that in common. High drive, high persistence. And it was the first time that I realized that my persistence probably could be a real negative. There's something called the sunk cost fallacy, which is basically like once you've put a lot of effort into something, you just kind of keep investing in it or keep going on that path because you've already invested so much. And I really learned during that period what a important ability and even superpower, you could say, it is to be able to quit, to be able to say, yeah, I worked hard at this, I cared about this, but the feedback is that this is clearly not working. And I either need to make a major pivot or I need to go a different direction altogether. And it probably took us longer than we should have with that shoppy business idea. But learning that, like I said, kind of was the prelude for all of the career success I've had since then, because I become less married to ideas or approaches. And I'm able to understand now when I'm not getting the feedback or the evidence I need for like the train of thought or path I'm on, that I'm willing to drop it. I'm willing to change. I don't become as emotionally attached or invested to it.
A quick question here before I move to a follow-up question before I move to my second one. When does an entrepreneur or a young entrepreneur founder knows that it's time to give up or just pivot?
It's a great question, and I'm still like chewing on, how do you make that answer transferable to anybody's situation? But I think there's two very different kind of circumstances that we can come into. One is that we've gotten clear pieces of data that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just going to be very hard to get to it. And another is that there's no data really that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm continuing to persist out of hope or out of my own desire for it to be a viable idea. But I really haven't, from customers or from the market, really gotten evidence that my thesis is right. In general, my biggest business mistakes have all had one kind of characteristic in common, and that was that I became disconnected from the feedback of the market and customers. And so, a good example I give in that blog post you referenced is you'll see people try out for a show like American Idol. The judges are all like, no, you are not good. And then you see the interview afterwards where the contestant is like, this is my dream. I'm not giving up. And they put them in that show as kind of like a cringe moment. You're kind of laughing at the contestant. But the reality is we all do that. We all sometimes get on a train of thought or, working on something where we become, resistant to feedback that says anything other than what we want to hear. And we have to be honest with ourselves when we are. When every business, every kind of venture has a kind of a fundamental set of assumptions behind it. I think that the market wants X and that I'm going to be able to provide what the market needs by doing, A, B, and C.
I think what you mentioned here, customer feedback is really, really important. And I think one of the other example I give is I've heard an interview for Moise Ali. He started Native, and he says up to a certain, he had probably 100,000 customers. He was doing customer service himself, and he was getting feedback from his customers, and this is how he was finding problems in the product, or even sometimes problems in shipping that was costing them much more. And customer service is always important for any entrepreneur who's doing any startup. Always get feedback from your customers. Mike, we went through your career before Simple Modern. What made you start Simple Modern? Like, what was the gap in the market you saw? And your tweet, you say when you went inside the market, there were already a bunch of players. Mm-hmm. What made you started? How did you differentiate yourself from others?
Yeah, absolutely. So a principle that's a really helpful, like entrepreneurial principle, is that first you've got to learn to be a good operator and how to execute. And the best way to do that is either to be a part of a company that already has product market fit, where you're not in charge and you're learning, but you're on the front lines, or by doing some kind of a venture in a very niche kind of category where the competition is limited and you don't necessarily have to be operating at an A+ level to be successful right off the bat. And then as you become really competent as an operator, that you then start to level up in terms of the total addressable market or the size of market that you're competing in. I mean, if you think about like European soccer, it's kind of this idea, right? That like teams will be at one level, and then if they win that level, then they move up to the next. And, you keep kind of moving up and down the ladder based on your skill level. And I think that, that's exactly what you want to do as an entrepreneur. You want to say, as I become more skilled and I have more capital, and capital can be many things. It can be intellectual capital. It can be like the relational capital you can have. It can be your financial capital. But as I have more capital and as my intellect and my ability continues to grow, I can compete and have a viable chance in bigger and bigger markets.
Okay.
And so I had a couple of experiences where I had been successful in more niche type markets. Right. And I really felt like I probably had our founding team. We had the ability to operate at a high level. So we weren't intimidated or scared off from the idea of competing in a category like drinkware, competing on Amazon. So that's kind of the first step. But I do think you have to be honest with yourself about just, hey, where am I in the journey?
Right.
Because somebody who's never been an operator before and isn't dealing with a lot of capital, it's probably going to go poorly if you try and, create whatever, a beverage company. Now, I know people are trying to do it, and I want to encourage and support them, but it's like that's about as competitive an industry as it is. So it's going to be really challenging. The second kind of principle is that once you do have these chops, you should go after a really big total addressable market type category, because no matter how competitive any category is, there's always room for an additional differentiated competent player.
Okay.
And so it's easy to look at a market and be like, wow, so competitive. And so many great brands, like Drinkware's this way. There's a lot of really well-run companies. It's easy to just say, hey, well, there's already tons of players. And people equate competition as a negative, that if there's a market where there's a lot of competitors, then that means competition. That means my chances of success are lower. In one way, I can agree with that. But in another sense, the more competition there is, the more demand there is. And so the more customers there are to sell to, the more paths to victory that you have open to you. And so if you have the competency going after a really big market like drinkware, where there's 100 strategies that can be successful, is a much easier thing than trying to go after a market where, hey, there's room for one or two players in this entire market. So that's what we did. We went after drinkware, and what we decided was we were going to launch online first. We had the observation that most of the big drinkware companies had not focused on Amazon. Most of them were not focused on differentiation through colors and ornamentation.
Right.
And we were going to sell A+ quality, premium quality products at a really affordable price, at more affordable prices than some of our competitors. And we were right. There was room in the market for another company like that, and that's how we got our start.
Okay. You speak about two important points. First, you went through Amazon, and when you speak with a lot of founders or people in the e-commerce space, they're like, don't go for an Amazon built brand or don't go buy an Amazon built brand. Why did you go the other way?
Well, fundamentally, and I do hear that a lot, and I'll just say the smart guys that I talk to, the guys that are running, the people that are running scaled businesses, none of them are afraid of Amazon. Okay. And they understand that Amazon is an important ingredient. I think in general, one of the things that's becoming increasingly clear is how difficult it is to run a purely D2C business and be profitable because of customer acquisition and a bunch of other things. And so Amazon can be a great piece of your distribution strategy. You have to understand what the role Amazon plays in the portfolio is. But fundamentally, where I think people get scared is that they're like, well, my margins might be lower on Amazon and, it's not as good for my brand and brand building. But here's the thing. My fundamental belief is the number one thing that builds your brand is people using your product. Like, that's what builds your brand. It's not influencer, and if you think about even the brands that you love, like the ones that you use every day are so far above the ones that you've just seen on social media with an influencer or whatever, because you have this personal connection with it. And so we realized pretty early on, like, this is a bottles in hand kind of game. Like our brand is directly proportional to how many people are using our product every day. And we need to maximize the number of people that have our product. And there's no way we can do that without really prioritizing Amazon as a sales channel. Okay. So going after Amazon and D2C simultaneously helped us to get to some kind of a critical mass of customers relatively quickly, which would have been probably impossible any other way.
Okay, and it's interesting you think like that, because I had Sean Frank before on this pod, and he said if anyone's starting new in the e-commerce world, it's easier for them to acquire their first customers on Amazon and then go D2C, Shopify or whatever, and go on like that. And it's interesting seeing people who are on a higher level functioning at $100 million have the same kind of mindset. And that tells young entrepreneurs starting the space where they should go. The second part you speak about is going into retail and physical, going Target, Walmart, different brands. What pushed you to go that way? And a question with that would, or you could answer this question and then I'll ask the second question. I'm very sorry.
Well, fundamentally, like, here's why most e-commerce companies don't work. They don't work because their SG&A line on their income statement is too big. And their sales, general, and administrative, and most of that's driven by their marketing budget. In a nutshell, most companies don't work because they have to pay really big customer acquisition costs, which causes them to have to price the product at a level where it can't be on Target shelves or Walmart shelves, and where it prices them out of a product that most people can buy. This is my general observation, because they're having to pay, $20, $30, $50 in customer acquisition costs to Facebook or Google or whoever. We recognized this pretty early on. And so what we did is we built a business where we said, we're going to find a way to leverage all of the existing retail giants and their customer bases for our customer acquisition cost. We're not going to pay for it by and large. So at this point in our company, our marketing budget is somewhere between like 1% and 1.5% of our revenue, which is just absurdly low, for compared to most D2C companies.
And you're speaking on Facebook, TikTok, Google. Everything paid media. It's maybe 1 to 1.5% of our total revenue. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we've said, hey, anywhere where we can acquire customers and we can do it in a way where we're not having to pay the customer acquisition cost, this is a home run for us. So that's Target, that's Walmart, that's Sam's Club, that's Amazon, and there's other, like we work with pro sports teams in their shops and stuff like that, like at the stadium. There's all these kind of opportunities like that where it's like, hey, we're acquiring customers, we're introducing customers to the brand, and we're not having to pay anything for that customer acquisition cost. And as a result, we can price our product really affordably. And that makes us really attractive both online and in physical retail. Jeff Bezos has a great quote where he said,
you should spend your money making a great product instead of spending your money trying to tell everybody how great your product is. And that's pretty much what we've done. Like, invest your money into, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the way you price your product is part of your marketing budget.
Right.
And so, just to draw a parallel, like if you look at the income statement of somebody like Yeti, great brand, very high price points compared to us. But if you look at the percentages, like the EBITDA margin and some of the percentages on the income statement, they actually have about the same numbers as us when you get to actually what they make in profit. And the reason is because they just have to spend way more than we do on sales, general, and administrative, because you're at these higher price points, right? In order to continually be messaging and convincing customers that they should pay twice what they can pay for your product, you've got to invest all that money in marketing. It can work. It's a viable model. But I think that most of D2C, if you think about where D2C started as this idea that we're going to cut out the middleman and, the retailers and all these people, and we're going to be able to provide a better value proposition to customers. But what happened is Facebook and Google and the digital advertisers became the new middleman.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, D2C, it's a worse value proposition than going to Walmart. Like, you're asking me to pay $50 for something on your website that I can buy for $25 at Walmart. Like, why would I do that?
Okay.
And I don't think you'll see, and this is one of the reasons why you just don't see these examples of really profitable or really successful D2C companies by and large, because there's so much of the value proposition is built around the marketing budget. So that's kind of the main thing that I would communicate to people is how you price your product is part of your marketing budget, and that you can use physical retail and wholesale relationships to help you to acquire more customers. And the more customers you have, the more brand awareness you have. And if you have a really great product, then that creates this flywheel that really helps you to grow and build on yourself.
So a lesson we could take from this is brick and mortars isn't going anywhere. People are always going to shop at stores. We're not going to, because we saw a huge growth in online purchases in the past 2-3 years. But from what you're saying and the data you're seeing, brick and mortar is still going to be here.
It's still going to be here. And really just the future is hybrid is really my message to everybody. That, like, for example, with Target, 10% of our units we sell at Target are buy online, pick up in store, which means somebody puts it on their app and then they just grab it the next time they're in Target.
Right.
And so, that's not e-commerce, pure e-commerce, and that's not pure physical retail. That's a hybrid.
Okay.
Like Walmart grocery delivery. Is that e-commerce or is that physical retail? Well, it's kind of a, it's a hybrid. And that's where things are going, is where you're going to see physical retail and e-commerce, and then this kind of hybrid that they're all going to kind of merge together. And all of the retailers are headed this direction. And the brands that are going to win are going to be the ones that are taking advantage of an omni-channel approach. Right.
And this is why we saw Amazon open physical stores too. They're opening physical stores, which is true. And in a previous episode, again, Sean spoke about, for you to be in e-commerce, you should have a killer product. And you mentioned that your product is really important. And you also spoke about distribution. How did you at Simple Modern tackle distribution? Was it just doing paid ads and then going inside stores?
Yeah, I mean, it was, we started on Amazon. We were willing to give away product and to do whatever it took to get some initial product into people's hands, to get the initial reviews of what people thought, and then at some point, you hope that the combination of the prices you're selling at and the quality of your product is going to create some kind of an organic, effect, and that's what happened. And so as we sold more product on Amazon, we would launch into more categories. Okay. And then we got big enough in Amazon where we were able to go to people like Target and say, your customer is already buying a bunch of our stuff. They're just not buying it through you. They're buying it online. Mm-hmm. And, this isn't great for you. What you need to do is have us on your shelves. And we've gotten into these retailers and grown to the point where, we're Target's biggest supplier in our category. But this is basically, the nature of what you're trying to do. And so there was some money spent on Amazon advertising early on, but we really just didn't. we didn't spend that much money. Where we would spend money, I would say, even more than advertising sometimes, was giving product away and kind of seeding product in a way. Sometimes that was more powerful for us because, again, what we found was once people got the product, they're like, this is fantastic, and this is $20. Like, are you serious? And it naturally led to more purchasing and got things going. For some companies, marketing, influencer, different things like that can be exceptionally successful. It just wasn't, another thing that's worth calling out here is we had competitors that were very entrenched at higher price points. And so with our competitive strategy, we weren't going to be taking the same gross margins, and we just could not pay for customer acquisition. We couldn't make the numbers work to pay $15 for customer acquisition on a digital sales channel. So that, in some ways that's constrictive, but in other ways it was really helpful where it's like, well, paid is not going to work well for us. So what are the other things that we can do to kind of create this initial traction that we can build off of?
I have a bunch of, with each time you answer, that opens for me a bunch of questions. So I'm trying to take them one at a time. What's a strategy for an e-comm brand to get into stores, into retail stores? Is it just proving that you have a lot of sales online and, customers want our product, you should have it in your store, or is there something else to the game?
No, I mean, I think at a base level, if people want to learn more about this, I have a thread that I wrote on Twitter probably 3 or 4 months ago where I really break down and demystify the retail process.
Right.
But on a basic level, what retailers are trying to do is they're trying to grow their sales and their profits. They can't really build that many more new stores every year. And so they have to try and figure out, how do I get my same stores to be selling more and making more profit?
Okay.
And there's really not a lot of different levers available to do that. If you think about it, retail is almost like a real estate game where they have a certain amount of square feet and they're trying to figure out, how do I get more out of that square feet? So the main thing that brands can do that can make a compelling pitch for retail is constantly saying, hey, what are new trends that are developing in the marketplace that we need to be represented in? And those trends, usually will start online. And I think e-commerce brands are the ideal candidates to be bringing those to retailers and saying, hey, this is a new product category or a new product preference that's emerged, and we're doing really well. And we're seeing all of this demand and growth online because it's being, neglected or ignored in physical retail. And I think the more that you can say to, a Target or a Walmart, this is something that people really want. There's a lot of proof of this happening online. You're either not represented here in store or you're not represented in a key way with how the demand is going online. And so if you put us on your shelf, we're going to be incremental. We're going to capture some of the same shoppers that are going down your aisles already. They're going to pick up more items because they're going to see an additional need that they have met during their next trip to Target or whatever. And if you can make that argument, then you can get physical retail placement. But the evidence needs to be that there is, I would say, either one of two things. Either there is a really significant trend online that they're missing out on, or that your brand has become so preferred by customers that it is going to significantly impact their business just being represented in your brand. Okay. Being able to make that argument is tougher, right? Like, you've got to really have a significant kind of base of customers or incredibly committed customers to be able to make that argument that, hey, just our brand alone is going to lift this. So some combination of you're not represented in things you need to be, or our brand is going to pull in a lot of purchasing and customers that you're not currently getting. That's what you want to put together.
Two quick questions over here. Okay. When you're an e-commerce brand starting out, do you work with agencies or do you hire in-house? What's the model here?
I think it depends. We've worked with some agencies. There's a creative agency out of California that we've worked with that's been fantastic and really helpful in creating a brand video that kind of explains who we are and what the business is all about, and some of our marketing campaigns. We've also done some things in-house. I mean, I think the trade-off is always the agency model can be great when you can't afford full-time people and you're just trying to get, to initial, like, when you're in your early stages, you don't have money for a creative director or dedicated photographers or models or whatever. The agency model can be great for that in terms of creating content or even managing ad spend if you're not managing that much. But as you get bigger, you do tend to gravitate towards more and more of those things come in-house. So like we have a full creative team at Simple Modern, and we do a ton of photography and design work internally, in addition to working with, an agency or two and quite a few different contractors all over the world.
Okay. So if you're small, in a way, if you're a small brand starting, you don't have the budget, work with agencies. Once you start getting bigger, hire in-house. Second question.
One thing I'd say there just is like the principle is when you're trying to get to product market fit, you're just trying to keep your expenses as low as possible.
Right.
And then once you get to product market fit, it does change and turn a little bit. But yeah, in the earliest days, you're either trying to work with an agency or even figure out, hey, can I do this myself?
Okay.
Until I get to the point where I know I've got something. And then maybe I use an agency for a while. And then if I get to big enough scale, then I'm going to bring it in-house.
Okay. We saw Apple throwing out some privacy changes, and that affected Facebook or Google or different ads with budgets. How did, as someone who's been in e-commerce for a long time, how did this affect Simple Modern, or what do you advise founders to do in this type of situations when their marketing budget is going higher because of attribution and different other items?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that from what I've read, I think we're probably a year out from things getting considerably better because Apple is going to be creating some things that will be helpful for targeting people. And maybe even the targeting gets better over the next couple of years than it ever was. But I think it illustrates a simple point, which is if you're completely dependent on one way of acquiring customers, then you're vulnerable as a business. Like if your strategy, and there were a lot of brands that, or people that had things that they thought were a business, but it was really 100% dependent on, Facebook's ads manager. And the moment that you can't just give ads manager a few basic inputs and it spit out, high quality, cheap leads, like, your business was kind of toast. So I think paid media is one kind of leg of the stool of being able to acquire customers and grow your brand. But if you don't have the other legs, if you don't have strong organic and referral traffic, if you don't have strong wholesale relationships, then you're just vulnerable. I mean, even if we went back to good we'll say targeting, like the Facebook targeting that we were seeing over like maybe 2019, 2020. Even if we went back to that, if CPMs go up a lot, it doesn't matter, right? And I think in general, the view that everybody should take is that the trend on digital acquisition has been that it's gotten more expensive, and that as time goes on, it's likely to be getting more expensive and not less.
Right.
And so, okay, if that's the case, then yes, have a digital acquisition strategy, but you're going to have some other customer acquisition strategies. I mean, the one other thing to say here is that there are different types of digital acquisition strategies, and the way that you use email, the way that you use SMS, the way that the way that you use your social media, like these things all matter for customer acquisition as well, and they're not they're very cost effective in respect to in comparison to some of the paid media options.
Right. Coming to my last three questions.
Okay.
What trends are you seeing in e-commerce? And if you weren't building Simple Modern, or if you weren't the CEO of Simple Modern, what would you be building right now?
So I think the trends in e-commerce are it is going to be a massive consolidation. I mean, we're just in a massive kind of shakeout period. 2020 might have been the best year ever to start an e-commerce business. And 2022 might be the toughest year ever to be in an e-commerce business. And so we've gone kind of ditch to ditch. And sadly, there's going to be a bunch of brands that go away, consolidate. I do think the strong operators I know, they're going to be looking opportunistically to buy other brands and to consolidate.
Okay.
I think if I wasn't working on Simple Modern, what I would be working on, I'll tell you what I would do. I would look at Google Trends, and there's a search tool in Amazon Seller Central, or Jungle Scout has things like this. I would have a bunch of different inputs where I could look for emerging trends that hadn't gotten big yet, but were starting to really show growth and starting to really surface. And I would probably try and build another consumer brand around an emerging trend. And there have been quite a few just in the last 10 years,
Right.
like there in the nutrition space. I'd love to do something consumable, for example. And like, there's been a ton in the nutrition space around vegan, around gluten, around keto, all of these things. And so you've seen a lot of disruption. So that's probably what I would look for. I'd look for what's an emerging trend where it's not super saturated with competitors already, but where there's there's potential for it to be a really big market. And then I'd be really interested in building an omni-channel business.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
Who's one founder that's under the radar that you'll bet your money on? And who's one founder or company that disappointed you?
Oh, gosh. It's hard for me to answer somebody who's disappointed me, because I have an appreciation for how incredibly difficult it is to lead. And, a lot of the success I feel like I've had with Simple Modern, I was fortunate enough that my brother was the CEO of the first company we did. I learned a lot from him. And so I have a lot of grace for founders. I'll give you one example that Sean might not have mentioned last week. I think I'm saying his name right. Michael Martucci. He runs Swag Up, really impressive guy who's built a business from zero to $70-80 million in revenue, and he's done it the right way. He's done it by bootstrapping, and he's done it through intelligent operating, and love talking with people like that. I really admire the guys that have done it with fundamentals. And we're coming out of a period where there was all this money and just stupidity really that was happening in terms of valuations and the types of ideas that money got thrown after. And so when you meet other founders where it's they're building something, they have a long-term vision, they have a clear understanding of how they're creating value for their customers and for other people, and they're not trying to kind of hit a get rich quick, but they're trying to really build something that has value to society and to their clients, and they've got a long-term plan, and you see them executing on that. I just love it every time I get to meet one of those. And so Michael's one of the more recent ones I've met.
Mike, amazing episode. I honestly have a lot of more questions to ask. If you have some time in the future, in the next 3-4 months, we could do another episode if you're open to it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here on a pod. Any plugs you want to put in? If someone wants to follow you, where should they go?
Absolutely.
LinkedIn,
If you want to follow me, you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Mike Beckham SM. And I talk about this type of stuff. I talk about kind of the intersection of entrepreneurship, e-commerce, and also trying to be, kind of meaningful and thoughtful about hey, what are we trying to accomplish? What's kind of the meaning and purpose behind these things? How do you build good culture? I kind of live at the intersection of those things. So if you want more content like this, that's the way to find me.
Thank you.